And good afternoon, everybody. Evening, everybody. This is Art Shed. It's time for the show. Let's be reasonable, folks. And this is the post mortem on the 2024 presidential election. And if you weren't paying attention, you saw the Democrats go down in flames yesterday. And what I would think to be spectacular fashion. Um, you know, Women were supposed to show up, Republicans were supposed to show up. There were a lot of people that were supposed to show up, and at the end of the day, no one showed up. So, um, what I wanted to do is spend a little bit of time and just kind of go over the things Democrats got right in 2024 and the things that they got wrong, and really just kind of look at, um, I guess you could say the wider story for Democrats is to consider that, well, you took a loss, right? So now it's time for you to just kind of pick yourself up and, you got to rebuild and start over. And there's a few things that you probably need to get right. Um, I think the biggest takeaway, without kind of going into some of the, just my opening thoughts, I guess you could call it. One of the biggest takeaways about this election cycle was the amount of misinformation that was floating around out there that Republicans utilized uh, with, excellent fashion. And then you have to look at the fact that Democrats really didn't have any answers for all the things that were being said. And it's interesting how, when you watch the numbers come in, it was crystal clear, I think, early in the night that when I saw the exit polls for Florida, I think it was really about 4:30, 5 o'clock, and they were saying that the women were voting for the abortion, right? The abortion ballot measure, and then turning around and voting for Trump. I was like, yeah, that's probably not a good thing. And you had to remember, everyone, if you're looking at the talking heads, everyone was saying that, she needed the blue wall in order to win. I was saying with my calculation that beside the blue wall, there were certain things that would need to show up early in the night. And I started with the state of Indiana. When you look at the state of Indiana, the native sonism issue shows up. You ask yourself the question: how popular is Mike Pence in his home state, and are Republicans willing to stand by Mike Pence like never Trumpers, and say send a message to Donald Trump in saying that, hey, you know what, we support our native son, and we believe that you don't disrespect your native son, right? And we didn't see that show up. You looked at the vote count, and it was actually greater. So there was never Trump forecast early in the night. And I told you that it would probably show up in Indiana, also South Carolina, because you got to remember that Nikki Haley, I tell you, I got to tell you, I don't believe she voted for Donald Trump personally. Nikki Haley, over the last couple weeks, if you listen to what she was saying, she's posturing and positioning herself for a possible run in 2028. So her wish is to remain relevant over the next few years. And I guess I can understand that. So, but when you look at Indiana and you look at South Carolina and you look at the Never Trump vote, and you look at the fact that, with Liz Cheney and Dick Cheney and, 500 other people who said Donald Trump is unfit, is a fascist and everything else that they were saying, you would think that permission slip structure would show up in the count and would show up early. So I said Indiana and South Carolina would be the big test. After, remember, I said when you look at the postmortem, or not the postmortem, but would you look at the exit polling? You look at the exit polling that was released at like 5 o'clock, and they were polling women coming out of the booths in Florida, and you saw that they were voting for abortion, but then voting for Trump. I was like, that doesn't bode well for her. That doesn't bode well for Harris. And ultimately, you saw that was the case. So by the end of the night, it was supposed to be a party for unity, right? It was supposed to be a party where you saw Democrats and Republicans, let's protect the union, and all of these different things that they were discussing. And it turned out to be, the girl dancing on the dance floor by herself, right? And, I can't say that I feel sorry for them. I see that personally, I think there were things that they just never really took advantage of. And there were things that Republicans did. You got to remember, Republicans didn't have a ground game. And Democrats showed themselves to have a formidable ground game, especially in the battleground states, but it didn't translate. So you can knock on 800,000 doors and still lose Pennsylvania by roughly, let's just say 300,000 votes. That's not good. So that tells you that the economy played more of a factor that Democrats could not run away from, for better or for worse. Because I can tell you, in my estimation, my degree's in political science, but anyway, when you look at it, the Trump administration bears some responsibility for the tariffs and for inflation. I mean, you can't just spend in deficit and in debt $4 trillion and it not show up somewhere. So it showed up during the Biden administration. And for Biden, you can't spend another $3 trillion in infrastructure and some other things you want to do and it not show up. It's going to show up. And it showed up in spectacular fashion with 9% inflation. So, it is what it is. It happened. People can say that it's unfair, but you know what? You gotta, if you're going to be responsible about this, right? You have to accept the lumps that you take, and that was just a lump that Democrats couldn't outrun. And I believe Democrats suffered from, I believe, some poor messaging in certain areas. Some of the things that they allowed Republicans to kind of get away with misinformation. And the misinformation was kind of hard to track. You got to remember, early in the presidential selection, by the time that Biden says he's going to run for reelection, which I think is another mistake, he should have just stayed with the one term and cleared the deck. But he decided he wanted to stay in the race. And him staying in the race until June, July probably was the death knell, because it showed that the party was disorganized at some point. And the fact that they kind of anointed Kamala the heir apparent, well, she's the vice president. You would have been better to have a brokered convention, but it didn't happen. But anyway, so I mean, all of this water under the bridge. But my point is, there's a messaging that, and Republicans, to their credit, you got to say the misinformation message worked spectacularly. I mean, Democrats never could get out in front of it. And you would think, I mean, when you think about Democrats and you think about the elitism supposedly that exists, you would think that they would be on top of the technology and be on top of a lot of these things, but they weren't. I mean, one minute you're for TikTok, the next minute you're not for TikTok, right? And not being able to make a decision, that vacillating back and forth, you're behind the pale. And by that time, I mean, the power curve had already been set. Republicans were just, with everything, just relentlessly just picking misinformation. And you got people believing stuff that's, crazy. but at the end of the day, it just did not go down well for Democrats. And this is where I would tell Democrats to, pick yourself up, get yourself ready for the next fight, because the show goes on. Um, just try to figure out what you learned from this experience, because you're going to run into this again. Now, I got to tell you, I look at this race 2024. I personally look at this race and say, you elected a king. And Republicans, if they get control of both the House and the Senate, I think you're going to be hard pressed to see Democrats see the light of day when it comes to power in the House, in the Senate, and the White House. You probably locked them out for the next really 2 or 3 cycles. But Democrats, I got to tell you, they did it to themselves. Over the last 3 census cycles, 30 years, people, Democrats have allowed Republicans to get a foothold into state legislators. They've allowed Republicans to gain a bigger footprint when it comes to congressional districts, right? When you control the maps, you control everything that's going on, right? So, and that's what Democrats have allowed. They put a lot of their attention over the past 30 years in being able to have a popular vote count greater than Republicans in order to get the White House. I got to tell you, look, the White House is important, but Congress is where the sausage is made, right? So you have to control Congress. And if you don't control Congress, the president can't do anything by executive order. He needs Congress and he needs legislation in order to provide funding for a lot of things that you want to do. So think about the border wall during the last Trump administration and all the executive actions that were done, which where'd they end up? They ended up in court. And a lot of those things were declared unconstitutional, and the things that weren't declared unconstitutional, you were just left with, small different incremental things that you could do that didn't require money. And the money that you were moving around, the military money that you were moving around, you were doing it under the name of national security. So I mean, it doesn't run that way. But that's water under the bridge. So I'm going to tell Democrats, hey, you know what? You took an L. Put your big boy pants on. Get up. Dust yourself off. You need some new blood. I don't think Harris runs again. I've developed a code over the past 24 hours. I have no idea how that happened, but it's here. But anyway, I don't believe Harris runs again. And since she's not going to run again, you're going to need new blood at the DNC. You're going to need new blood at the top of the ticket. Look, who's going to be your standard bearer in the House and in the Senate? Is it going to be Hakeem Jeffries? And I mean, if you think about it, they're in the minority. Do you trust Chuck Schumer in the Senate to be the Democrat standard bearer? I don't think so. So who's it going to be? You need new blood. Someone to provide you with the direction going forward, because what you're currently doing right now, obviously, you ended in a loss. And I got to tell you, it was in spectacular fashion. So anyway, let's kind of look at these are some of the exit polls when it comes to men versus women voting. I got to tell you, I mean, if you're looking at this and you're a Democrat, you were let down yesterday by Republicans and the permission slip. You were let down by women, right? You do all this white women coalitions and the rest of it. They let you down. So this kind of reminds me of the old movie line from what was the name of that movie? The Fifth Element. I think his name was Zoid or whatever the heck his name was. But in one part of the movie, he said, if you want something done right, do it yourself. And you can't rely on, these other tangible, or you would say these other entities that are foreign to the Democrat experience to carry the water. You need to carry the water yourself. And that just kind of shows up. So when you look at men versus women, uh, comes across, or when you look at men, 42% of men voted for Harris, 55% voted for Trump, 53% of women voted for Harris, 45 voted for Trump. Um, Interesting statistic. Again, I bring up the fact that early exit polling out of Florida in the 5 o'clock hour yesterday showed that women were voting for the abortion measure, but they were also voting for Trump. At that point, I knew she was in trouble because whether women knew it or not, they were voting against their interests by voting for Trump. And I'm assuming they knew it. So if they knew it, that meant they had to know. I mean, who goes into, I don't know. I mean, maybe they didn't know, but I still look at it and ask myself the question, who goes into a voting booth on a ballot issue alone and decide that everything else can remain the same? Look, if Republicans get control of the House and get control of the Senate, Katie barred the door in the first 2 years of the next 2 years because they are going to push through everything they want to push through. So you're going to see that abortion ban if they get control of the Senate. And I'm here to tell you, Trump's going to sign it. So everything you did, think about it, all the money you raised, Harris team and the rest from women and from other coalitions, the Hey Dudes and everybody, all of that is for naught because part of your coalition did not do what they were supposed to do. They didn't show up. All right. So, and because they didn't show up, it pretty much, you know, created the predicament that you're going to experience over the next 2 years. Now, also, I mean, I guess I could just kind of look. We know what women did. We know what men did. How did voters from different age groups vote? Obviously, younger people vote Democrat, 30 to 40, 49%. So about 50-50 here. Then we see the transition. The older you get, the more conservative you get. So that's kind of on par with what we would expect. Our voters from different racial and ethnic groups voted. White people, 41% voted for Harris. 57% of white people voted for Trump. 85% of black people voted for Harris. Really about 12 or 13, 14, 15, what is that? 15% voted for uh, for for Trump. Hispanics pretty much broke 50-50. Asians, that's a little bit, I believe, more Asian friendly for Trump than usual in the other category. So, I mean, when you see these numbers, I mean, it just tells you why they lost. But and you gotta, let me say it this way: everyone on the media, they were looking at the blue wall. She needed to hold the blue wall, and I'll just make this point again that there were other factors that were going on when you got that call from Ann Seltzer in Iowa on Saturday that she felt that independent women were going to turn out in spectacular fashion. And, they did, but they just voted their interest and they stuck to their party line. But anyway, you saw those things happening, right? And I had 6 things that we needed to look at. We needed to look at Indiana and South Carolina early just to see, or just to kind of give us a temperature if Republicans were using that permission slip from the Cheneys and other people in order to vote for Harris. It didn't show up, right? And then we talked about the native sonism, how popular is Nikki Haley in her state, how popular is Mike Pence in his state, how popular is John McCain, deceased John McCain in the state of Arizona, how popular are the never Trumpers in this native son piece. And we saw it show up that Pence wasn't popular. Nikki Haley isn't popular. John McCain, it's the jury's out that there are definitely never Trumpers down in Arizona, but it seems like they don't exist anywhere else, which is strange, but that's possibly true. We also thought about if COVID would play a factor in the 2024 race. And if you had watched the show the other day, we talked about how it was going to be a small factor because when you think of the effects of, thanks, babe. When you think of the effects of COVID, you were looking at really like 0.3, 0.4, let's just say less than 1% would make up the count. And you're talking about 500 people to maybe 1,000 people that could possibly show up in the blue wall states, but anywhere else it was kind of a minuscule number where it really wouldn't make much of a difference. So there were like the abortion issue was on the table in like 6 or 7 states. There were like 6 issues that we were looking at early in the night, and when they didn't show up, excuse me, when they didn't show up, it was crystal clear it was not going to be a good night for Kamala Harris. So anyway, back to the numbers. College graduates obviously vote Democrat more than Republicans, right? Non-college people vote Republican. Always an interesting stat. What else can I tell you? You know what? I mean, the post-mortem on this is that Democrats have to do better going forward. And we'll see what happens. They need new leadership, new blood. So look for the DNC to turn over. There will be a new head of the DNC. Question you got to ask yourself if you're Democrats: do you ever run a woman again? It's been a loser twice. You know, do you do it again? I don't know, because and the same person has defeated a woman twice, so that doesn't bode well in the future. I mean, there must be some dynamic changes if you're going to run a woman at the ticket. She probably needs to be a little bit more aggressive, but then Republicans will take advantage of that too. She's more too manly. That'd be the stance. Yeah. So anyway, I mean, the postmortem on Democrats, you got to do better. Look for new blood. And you know what? 20 minutes in, and I got a cold, and I'm not feeling well, so I'm going to end this. I may come back to this maybe sometime later in the week and talk about some more things, because I do believe what Democrats should be thinking about going forward. They should be thinking about what's going to be the Trump messaging. I have a sneaky suspicion that Trump will declare that the U.S. is no longer a cesspool, right, before the end of the year, and that the economy is great, after he told you that the economy was trash for the last 4 years, right? All right. So when he does that, I'm here to tell you that you and I will see that Trump will tell businesses to cut their prices. We'll see how well that goes down. I don't think that they're going to cross him, right? We've elected a king, people. So I don't think that they're going to cross him. He's going to promise them something on the back end, something to kind of, soften the blow of being able to, collect whatever revenue that they would have normally collected. And eventually, that is dependent on Congress passing legislation. And if Republicans have Congress, and they'll be able to pass some legislation, possibly, right? But at the end of the day, these items that make Trump this formidable figure will show up. And it will be up to businesses. Look, I'm going to tell you, the power in this country does not lie in Washington. It really lies with business. Most people believe that Washington is the culprit. No, Washington's the culprit only because legislation needed flows through there. But really, it's the corporation and the mega corporations and lobbying that really runs the United States. So what I would tell Democrats you should be doing right now, you should be putting together a forecast list of all the different things that Trump is going to claim responsibility for. And you should be putting it out there. He's going to do this. He's going to do that, whatever these items may be, because you need to get there first. And then that helps you craft a message. You know, I'll tell you this, and then I'll get off here. Here's the most salient message I can give Democrats. Hear me on this. When you talk to MAGA supporters, they tell you they want to go back to, a time where they're talking about the 1950s. Most cases, you hear them, and maybe they're not saying that, but that's what we're thinking. They're going back to a time during the 1950s when they talk about "Make America Great" and the rest of it, right? But I'm here to tell you that during that particular time, taxes, especially marginal tax rates, were at an all-time high. In certain cases, in the 50s, the highest marginal tax rate was like 90%. So if you want to go back, just know that when you're telling people that America was great, that was great during the time where taxes were high. All right. So, and when you really look over the past 40 or 50 years since Reaganomics and supply side economics, that's when things really started going downhill for the US. So, supply side economics is really your problem. Republicans are even running away from supply side economics now. Supply side economics would tell you don't do tariffs. But that's the first thing Trump wants to do. In fact, I was listening to the Joe Rogan show, and he was on talking about he wants to get rid of taxes altogether and fund the government through tariffs. And I'm like, okay, let them have it. Let them do it. See what happens. But I'll tell you right now, corporations aren't going to be happy about that. And the American people won't be happy about that because that only creates price instability. So, but anyway, look, folks, I got to get out of here. It's about 30 minutes. It's about time, all the time I have allotted. And I'm not feeling that well anyway. So I'll probably just get back on here later this weekend. And I got like 8 things that I haven't even got to yet. And I'm kind of all over the place because I'm not feeling great. But just look forward to the broadcast over sometime this weekend. Like and subscribe. And give me your comments too. Comments definitely help the show. So I'm going to get off of here. So enjoy your evening. Tonight is Wednesday, post-election. If you're sad, turn that frown upside down, right? The sun also rises. Put your big boy pants on. Get back in the race. Do the things that you need to do. All right, folks. Have a great evening.